turn your video off. And whoops, I'm opening up my PowerPoint without actually sharing my screen, which is not as helpful. Share screen, PowerPoint. Oh, you know what? I did this last time, didn't I? Then when I started the slideshow, it didn't work anymore. Sharing is paused. Yep. Just have to remember, start the PowerPoint first. Someday I'm going to remember this. I've only taught like 20 classes. You'd think I'd remember how to use my PowerPoint.
We'll have to tap on.
Yeah, right? It's like, oh. Okay. Oops. Let me, and now let me pin myself here. Okay. Perfect. All right. Well, welcome to class number 4. Thank you so much for all your sharing and your questions. Today, what we're going to go through is we're going to go through affirmations a little bit, how to work with those, especially how they relate to relationships. We'll talk about different types of intimacy and how to work with intimacy levels. We'll touch on a personal peace procedure, which is just kind of a layout of things we want to be aware of in our life, things that we can tap on. Remember I talked about those tabletops? You know, things that could fall under these tabletops that may be instrumental in helping us do some of our own self-healing. And then we'll do final questions and kind of next steps. So today's really focused on working with partner style relationships. So that can mean anything from people that you're dating, your exes, your current partner, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever that looks like for you, or even the thought of, because remember we can work in the future, getting into a relationship again. So for some of us, that can be a really exciting thing. For some of us, that can be a really scary thing. For some of us, you know, we want to try not to bring the baggage of our old relationship forward into our new relationships. So beyond working on your old relationships and things that were challenging for you either during the relationship, after the relationship, during the breakup process, also look at what are some of your beliefs around relationships. So what is your belief on what a marriage or partnership looks like? This can be informed by a lot of things. This can be informed by how your parents were growing up. So maybe you only grew up in a single parent household. Maybe you grew up being raised by somebody else, by a caretaker. Maybe you were adopted. Maybe your parents split when you were young or when you were older. Maybe you saw some kind of abuse, some kind of power differential in the relationship. Maybe you saw a lot of touch, maybe you didn't, right? So there's all these things that inform what does our partnership look like? What should we tolerate? What should we put up with? What should we want? And even the messaging in the movies, the books, one of the most interesting things that we did when I went through my soulmate training and my soulmate coursework is they had us go through what are our favorite movies or books. And we had to, one of our homework assignments one night, overnight, was we had to, I'm sorry, I'm getting two things confused. But anyway, two classes confused. But anyway, same story. One of the things that we had to do is look at, is actually watch a video again of a movie that we loved and actually look at the characters and how are we living out that character's life or opposite of it, right? So in the soulmate course, we did talk about how do the Disney movies inform what we think a relationship should be like, right? You've got this girl and maybe she's strong or maybe she's not, but eventually she falls in love and she finds the guy and they live happily ever after. Right? And just things are just go like that. Or maybe there's a little bit of betrayal and then she realizes that she loves the other guy, right? Like in Frozen. So there's different ways that we learn about what relationships are supposed to look like. In the movies, right? There's supposed to be this drama or this, like I remember my big thing when I was younger, And even sometimes it catches me today, to be honest, is this like polarity of like, he wants her so bad and she just doesn't see it because she's caught on this other guy, right? Like for me, this was like this heartbreaking, like, why doesn't she see how great he is? And why is she in love with somebody else that doesn't treat her well? And this was like the story in my head of like what I should be like, how people should be treating me, how much guys should want me, how much affection they should show. I'm almost like like little puppy dogs following me around. And I'm like, that's not actually what I want, right? But those are the movies that informed my brain for a long time, that kind of subconsciously set into, oh, this is what love should look like. But then when I look at what I really want, it's not that. So it's interesting how sometimes even our emotions conflict with what it is we truly want, right? Because our brain's set up a different way than our heart, or our logic is trying to override our emotions, or whatever it is for each of us. So looking at who modeled that for you, where did that come from? Like I said, movies, books, parents, other people in your lives. You know, what relationships have you seen that have worked and not worked, and how does that inform your current lifestyle, your current choices and partners, your excitement to be free and not have a partner, or your desire to need a partner because you feel like you always need a partner, right? Any of those things, whatever it is for you. But challenge that model. Like, does it actually suit what you want? And what do you want? Versus what are you tolerating? What are you putting up with? What do you think just exists? What are the social standards of this is what a relationship looks like? Yeah, the woman always wears the pants, but the man pretends to wear the pants kind of stuff, right? The man's job is to take out the garbage. The woman's job is to cook, right? And so I'm not only talking about roles like that, but it actually, how are you supposed to interact as a partner, right? How much time do you spend with each other? How do you nurture each other? How do you touch or not touch, hug or not hug? Right? All of these things. So when you start looking at this, like, and looking at whether you're married currently, partnered currently, looking for a relationship, in a strong relationship, you can still use this technique with any affirmation, but this is especially, I just kind of tweaked it for relationships. But you can pick a strong affirmation on why you deserve healthy, connected relationships. And you can even do this if you're in a relationship and sometimes you feel lonely, or like, I don't feel like I deserve my partner because they're so great and I just am not living up to my end of the bargain, or whatever, right? That negative self-talk that can come in. But when we work with affirmations, it's different. So I want you, the basic technique that you've all been using for 3 weeks, I want you to kind of take that and just set that over here for now, right? That's your hammer. That's like, okay, you're just gonna you're gonna tap out everything with that hammer. This affirmation thing is a little bit different. It's more like your screwdriver, right? You're gonna pull it out for different situations. And this particular thing, this particular technique is really good when you're trying to figure out, where is my subconscious block, or where's my mind telling me something different than what I want? So if you pick a strong affirmation, let's say on why you deserve a healthy, connected relationship, and you tap using the whole affirmation on each point. This can be used for any affirmation, but we'll stick with a relationship. So like, I could be tapping on, I deserve a loyal partner. It could be as simple as that, right? Or you can go through your whole list. Like, I deserve a loving partner who's equal to me. And you can start tapping on these things, right? And you just like literally, I deserve I deserve a strong and loving partner. 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 And you can even say it a little bit inside your head or really quietly, because as you know, sometimes we say things out loud to reset it in our head, but also to keep us focused on a thing. And sometimes you'll be tapping through that and you're like, yeah, I do deserve a strong and loving partner. Great. But maybe your brain's like, well, can't really have that. There's not really any left. There's no good, strong, loving partners out there. I've looked. Trust me, I've been on every dating website. All the guys left out there, all the good ones are taken. Yep, all the good ones are taken, right? So now I can, instead of tapping on the affirmation, now I can tap on, wow, even though I feel fear in my stomach that I've missed out, all the good men are taken. I'm going to be alone my whole life. I deeply and completely accept myself. Because we hear these things that set into our brain about why we can't have what it is we want. So it can be even an affirmation, though. I deserve good communication in my relationship. I deserve good communication with my husband. Right? I'm ready to speak my truth with my husband. I'm ready to increase the level of intimacy in our relationship. Whatever that affirmation is for you, pick an affirmation and just keep tapping on it. I'm ready to have a strong, intimate relationship with my husband. I'm ready to have a strong, intimate relationship with my husband. I'm ready to have a strong, intimate relationship with my husband. And then somewhere your brain's going to be like, yeah, where are you going to fit in the time? Or what if the kids hear you? Or I just don't have any energy to give to anybody else, or whatever it is. Whatever your brain brings forward, as you're tapping that affirmation, that little voice in the back of your head that's like, no, it's not going to work. That's not how it is. Then you stop tapping on the affirmation, and then you go back, you pull out your hammer again, you set aside the screwdriver. Okay, even though I think it's too hard, I don't have the energy to have a good, intimate connection with my husband. I accept how I feel. So even though when I think about dragging my husband upstairs, it feels like too much work. Yeah, it makes me feel apathetic in my stomach. I deeply and completely accept how I feel. So even though I feel apathetic in my stomach, thinking about dragging my husband up the stairs to try to have sex with him, because I'm just too tired, or I don't get what I want, whatever it is, right? I deeply and completely accept myself, right? This apathy in my stomach, this apathy in my stomach, this apathy in my stomach. So we use this tapping on affirmations to help uncover what's underneath the thing that we're looking for. Because it's interesting, aren't they? If you think about the concept of affirmations themselves, I believe that all the money is going to come to me. I am manifesting everything in the universe. And don't get me wrong, I manifest stuff too. I'm not saying that they're bad, and I'm not making fun of them at all. But it's an interesting concept if we look at it, right? Because if I'm trying to bring something in, do I actually believe that I deserve that thing? Well, why isn't it with me already? Where have I been blocking that? Where has that not been? And maybe I just wasn't aware that that was a possibility before, and now I'm ready to step into that possibility. Or maybe for years I've been saying, I'm ready to pay off my debt, and God's going to help me pay off my debt. God's going to give me that perfect career to pay off my debt. And it's not happening. And then you're like, yeah, this doesn't work. Affirmations don't work. Prayer doesn't work. Whatever it is for you doesn't work because it's not happened. I've been talking about this for 5 years. But what inside yourself is not allowing that to come through? And that's where this tapping can really shine. If there's any questions, remember, just throw them in the chat or unmute yourself. So is there any questions at this point on kind of how to play with affirmations? So affirmations can even look like, I'm a sexy, powerful woman. Right? What does that feel like when you say that even out loud? Where do you feel it in your body? Or you can work with it in relationship to certain body parts if you're having body image challenges. Like, even though I feel like my stomach is ugly, I accept myself anyway. That's using your hammer. But your affirmation is, I feel powerful and beautiful. I feel powerful and beautiful. I feel powerful and beautiful. And then your brain goes, yeah, but what about that belly? Oh, and you ate that whole bag of peppermint patties last night, right? So then you get to work on that from that angle, even though I ate that whole bag of peppermint patties, which is not a lie, by the way. Just saying. I deeply and completely accept myself. Okay. All right. So here's what we're working with. And this is kind of common for all EFT, but I also just want you to think about this in the broader context of your life. Whatever it is that you believe creates an attitude with which you show up in the world. Okay. I ate a box of chocolate covered cherries. I love it. That's fantastic. Whatever your belief is creates an attitude of how you're going to show up in the world, which creates a behavior, which is going to create a result, which is going to reinforce the belief. Right? So if I believe working out is hard, and I get this attitude like, oh God, working out's hard, it's going to create the behavior, right? Of like, I don't want to work out. And then you're at the gym, you're trying to work out, right? And it's interesting, right? Because what we do in EFT is we change the belief. So our attitude feels a little better. So our behaviors can change. So our results change. So our belief can change again. But often what we do as humans, we start at the behavior. I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week. And I'm even going to drag my friend along because she hates going out to the gym too. And we're going to suffer together and we're going to get results, right? And for a while that works. But think about how much energy that takes, right? You're like, both, I mean, you can have fun doing it, don't get me wrong. But eventually what happens? For most people, then all of a sudden someone gets busy or something happens or there's a life change or the job gets in the way or the work gets in the way or someone gets hurt or someone goes on vacation or someone just goes, should we just get a cup of coffee today instead of working out? I mean, just once will be fine, right? And then all of a sudden this cycle has broken down because you haven't put all your energy into the behavior. And so the cycle breaks down and you can't, it's so much effort, right? You just can't do it anymore. You just don't do it anymore. And then you just cancel your gym membership. It's like, wow, I haven't used that in 6 months. Oops. But if we change our belief, working out is healthy for me, and I deserve to be healthy. You see how that attitude's a little bit different? That's going to inform, like, now when I'm going to the gym, I'm thinking, like, it's not my favorite thing, but I feel really healthy when I do it. And you start seeing these results of, like, oh, yeah, you actually, when I leave the gym, like, yeah, maybe I'm a little sore, but I kind of feel a little bit energized. And that reinforces that belief that, yeah, this is really fun. Working out is actually makes me feel healthy. I feel strong. My eating's in control, my whatever, right? Which creates the attitude of like, I want to keep going to the gym because now I'm feeling healthier. I'm believing these things. So instead of all this energy into the behavior, changing the behavior, I'm going to do this for 21 days to change my results. I'm going to do it takes they change it all the time. How many days it takes to change your habits, right? But what is a habit? A habit's a behavior. Why do you have the habit? Sometimes habits are you can change, right? Like, okay, I'm just gonna remember to put the dishes in the dishwasher right away. That's a habit that's changeable. But if your habit is linked to behavior, like I avoid going to the gym, right? Because I have this belief that the gym sucks. Right? There's a lot more energy that has to go in that cycle. Does that make sense? So this is the power of where you can use EFT too, is if you find yourself putting a bunch of energy, I should do this. I should change my diet. I should go work out. I should meditate. I should sleep more. I should be nicer to my kids. I should be nicer to my husband. I suppose I should have sex with my husband tonight because he does really like it. And I guess that's kind of my role as a woman in a relationship. Oh, but I should orgasm fast because, like, I don't want him to, waste a bunch of his time. And if not, maybe I should fake it because, like, that's what I see on TV all the time, right? And all of a sudden, our behaviors are reinforcing this whole cycle that separates us in our intimate relationships, instead of just understanding that, like, hey, maybe we're just going to play around and there is no expectation. Because I don't believe I have to orgasm in 3 seconds or that I have to orgasm at all. Maybe I just want the touch and the connection. And maybe I don't believe I have to do anything for him, which is going to make sex a lot more fun for me. Because now I'm coming at it from playfulness instead of from duty. And how is that going to change my behavior in the bedroom? And how's that going to change the result of how I experience intimacy? Talking about sexual, physical intimacy, of course, there's lots of different types of intimacy, which we'll talk about. But how is that going to change the loop? So if I start doing EFT to change my level of comfort with my partner or thinking about being with a partner, this whole cycle can shift. Now, once again, if you've had a history of abuse, of rape, of trauma, of shame, which every woman pretty much in the American culture and most cultures around the world do have shame around sex that was put into them. It needs some deeper work, and it may need some different levels of support. Right? So be careful if you have those kinds of histories on working on this for yourself without some level of support. Any questions on that? I spent a lot longer on that slide than I meant to. So intimacy, what is your definition of intimacy? Let's write down real quick. What is your definition of intimacy? What does intimacy mean to you? Where did that come from? So this is my roommate, AKA former husband. We were able to break up in a very good way, in a very communicative way of honoring each other's needs, that we weren't able to meet each other's needs and that the relationship wasn't suiting either of us very well anymore. And not to say that made it easy. There was still pain and grief and the whole cycle for a year or two, right? It's not like we became fast friends and just hung out right off the bat again, right? There was many, many years of healing, of sometimes having conversations again, like, hey, I just remembered this thing from, I got divorced 11 years ago. So this is before I knew EFT as well, right? So the conversations and homeopathy and some other tools were in my toolbox, but not EFT at that time, right? But we were able to really sit down and communicate. Where were we not hearing each other? But also, where did our brains inform us? And we had this realization, like, some of the stuff that we thought we should do, we actually were informed by what everybody kept telling us we should do. Or this is how it should look. You guys are such great friends. You guys should get married. I'm like, hey, maybe that's a good idea. We are such great friends, right? So it's interesting. The same thing comes from intimacy of all kinds. So intimacy can be emotional, physical, intellectual, spiritual, right? If you start Googling intimacy and different types of intimacy, some psychologists have a list of 10, like artistic and philosophical. And, it doesn't matter, right? You can label intimacy whatever you want. But physical is the one that most people think of when they think of the word intimacy. And it's, in fact, the word I use in business. I use the word intimacy without saying sex often if I'm in a business setting and I don't want to trigger people. So what level of intimacy do you desire emotionally, physically, intellectually, spiritually with your partner? What feels safe? What's been your history? Where is there shame or embarrassment? Okay, so even though, I feel shame even saying the word sex out loud. because I learned that was a bad word. You only have sex to have babies. I accept how I feel. Right? Even though it makes me sick to my stomach, even thinking about having sex, even thinking about cuddling, even thinking about sharing my spirituality. Right? So you can use this with any aspect of intimacy. But when we get into the actual physical intimacy piece, what is your view on your body, your sexuality, your role in the bedroom, what you deserve or don't deserve, what communication is appropriate and or expected? It was really interesting taking one of my EFT courses, and then I don't remember if it was in the course or if it was on the podcast, but they were talking about hysterical women, right? Like hysteria. And I see this all the time in the homeopathic books, and my homeopathic instructors back in the days used to say, like, oh, hysterical women just means any woman that was really overly emotional or really overly, and they kept going to the doctor because they were overly emotional. Well, it turns out hysterical women started out because they would go to the doctor and they'd have all these symptoms, and the doctor would physically touch them. They would come to orgasm, and that was the doctor's cure for their hysteria. So it helped the doctors get more money, right? It avoided the idea that women still weren't supposed to enjoy sex, right? But also women weren't allowed to go to the whorehouses like the men were, right? So it's this really interesting cultural thing that was so pervasive because it was so shameful. You could only go to the doctor to have an orgasm, right? And even then you were hysterical, right? Which is kind of considered a negative term now, right? What do you think when you think of, oh, that person's hysterical? It's like, oh, they're crying, they're sobbing, they're out of control, they're all this stuff, right? But when you look at movies, right, that are portraying sexual acts and things like that, what are the women usually doing? They're either like really mellow or they're really like screaming and banging the elevator or wherever it is, depending what kind of movie you're watching, right? So it's interesting how we think our role, what we should look like, what we should sound like, how we should act, how do we come forward for our partner? Yeah. And what is expected of us? And how does that inform our actual coming forward authentically, whether it be in the bedroom, whether it be in conversation, whether it be just telling your partner, like, I'm not really into sex, I just want to cuddle tonight. Is that okay? Or also, if your partner comes up and touches you, your husband comes up and touches you, whoever it is, like, hey, thank you for touching me. I really just would like to snuggle tonight. Are you up for that? Or whatever, right? So communicating clearly. When I was doing my research for my touch book, one of the most interesting things that I found out during my research, I was interviewing a woman who's a professional cuddler, because that is a thing now where you can hire somebody to come and cuddle with you in the safety of your own space, right? It's fully clothed. There's nothing intimate that happens, nothing like sexual that happens, right? It's like a massage in that kind of professionalism, right? Where there's nothing sexual about it. It's all just, how would you like to be cuddled? Would you like me to, big spoon, little spoon? Would you like me to just hold your hand? Would you like to rest your head on my shoulder? Like, how would you like to cuddle? And it's all up to the client as long as those boundaries are held. The woman I interviewed said that her main market was married men who came to cuddle because they felt like every time they were with their wives, they had to perform when they just wanted to cuddle. Which is interesting because when I interview women, they're like, oh God, my husband only touches me when he wants sex. So where are we not communicating? Right? So think about that. Oops. And here's the slide I forgot to finish. Dancing. So in this whole thing, right, this whole conversation of what's expected from us, where did our views come from? Where did our roles come from? When you think about dancing, right, you go way, way back in the 1700s and stuff. And what was dancing? Dancing or helping a woman into the carriage were the only ways that a man was allowed to touch a woman, right? So it had this certain thrill to it. Like, oh, you go and you dance and you just, you do the thing and you stay a certain proper part of apart. But like this is the male female touch that you get. And there was something very thrilling and very exciting and very invigorating about it. Right? Dancing is shameful in some spiritualities, some religions. Right? Dancing is part of some cultures where dancing is just a part of it. It doesn't matter if you're touching and moving and grooving on each other because that's separate from sex. In other cultures, dancing is you may as well be having sex because we just don't dance. Right? So even dancing has come a long ways. Like, remember Elvis Presley, like wiggling his hips, and then it was all like, oh, someone wiggled their hips on television. Like, oh my gosh, that was. So think about how these things have happened over time, right? Where our beliefs come from, how the culture has changed it, right? So just the same way that dancing has changed over time. Right? Just as those cultural norms informed how people were supposed to act. And I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just pointing out like this is how culture is, right? This is where our belief systems come from. What suits you and what doesn't suit you. So maybe the word the cultural norm is what suits you, and that's fantastic. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. What I am saying is if it feels like it doesn't suit you, this is how you can use tapping to kind of shift that. Any questions on that before I move on to the personal peace procedure? Okay. Now I kind of wish I could see all your faces because I've never given that lecture so clearly before, and I'm like, reacting. Like, are they like all embarrassed and in shock? Are they all cool? Anyway.
That's good.
Good. All right, so I gave you the affirmation technique. I asked you to explore parts of relationships, right? What you want, what is intimacy for you and what you want. That was part 2. So part 3 of tonight is the personal peace procedure. And this is what I want to leave you with to kind of give you a little bit of a roadmap of how you can use tapping, right? So we can use it just like we've been using it, right? Like I'm stressed out, sitting in front of my computer, I'm just tapping, whatever. Or I'm thinking about something that's emotionally charged, past, present, or future, and I'm doing the whole even though, blah, 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 and doing the whole rounds. So the personal peace procedure is really intended for those of you that are ready to do some really deep self-exploration and really deep healing work with yourself. So this can be done multiple ways, but the baseline is you're going to make a list of events and experiences you wish you would have avoided. So you can organize these by like things that happened with my mom, right? The time my mom spanked me, the time I mouthed off to my mom and she went and cried in her bedroom, the time that I argued with my mom and I still feel guilty about that, the time my mom died maybe, right? So all of these things with my mom, and then make one with my dad and my sister or my coworkers or my, so you can organize it by people. Some people moved around a lot when they were kids, so it's actually better to organize it by place. So this time that all the kids teased me when I moved to Germany because I didn't know how to speak German yet, right? The time I got beat up on the playground when I lived in France because I, was the new kid. The time I moved to Texas and I was really scared because whatever, right? So sometimes people will organize them by places. So what are all the things that happened in Texas? Well, the Texas had this teacher that was awful. I got, I ran into scorpions, like I learned all these different things in Texas, right? I learned all these things in Germany. You're supposed to act this way in Germany. You're supposed to be proper and prim. And I didn't know the language, right? So you can list off things front by space. You can also list off things by age, right? So like, and you can categorize these however you want. Kindergarten and before. Maybe you don't remember anything from back then. Fine. From 5 to like puberty. Okay, so even though I remember fighting with my sister when I was 8, even though I remember falling down on my bicycle and feeling really embarrassed, right? Even though I remember breaking my arm and being in the hospital, that still like makes me feel sick. I don't even know why, but it does. Right? So impactful moments that still bring an emotional charge. Then you get to like 11 to 13, or maybe now you're breaking it up into like junior high, senior high, college. Okay, my 20s, my 30s, my marriages, my relationships, right? So you can organize it however you want, but you want to organize it somehow for yourself, whatever feels logical. But just make this list of events and experiences you wish you had avoided. Evaluate the intensity of emotions for all these items. So I'm going to look at the time I was in Germany and I didn't know how to speak the language. I felt embarrassed. Well, what level of, or I feel embarrassed, excuse me. I feel embarrassed now thinking about that. What level of embarrassment do I feel right now? Well, like a 3. Right. Okay, remembering that time in France when I got beat up on the playground because I was a new kid. Well, right now, thinking about that, I feel angry. I feel angry at an 8. Like, why are kids so awful to each other? Right? So that might be top of my priority list. That might be something that I want to start tapping on because that anger from when I was 8, from getting beat up on the playground or whatever, I was 8 and I had a level 8, whatever. Right? So, but it's what I'm saying clear. So what you're going to do is just start looking at these times and these events and these places that still have emotional charge for you. And just start tapping on a little bit of them every day or as often as you want. So this picture here is from when I was in Sweden. They dropped me off right away in the morning. There was still hoarfrost. Actually, there was hoarfrost on the ground all day long. But this happened a lot when I was hiking because I get a little bit bored just sitting and tapping my own stuff in my own space because I get very easily squirreled, right? Like I'm like, even though I'm really angry because that guy contacted me again and he wasn't supposed to. Oh, shoot, I forgot to do the laundry. You know what I mean? Like that's me a little bit. So I go for a walk and I go for hikes in places that are more private. And that's where I do my work because then I feel like A, I'm connected to nature, which for me is really peaceful. B, I'm moving. There's nothing to distract me. I can't go in the kitchen and eat more peppermint patties. I can't go do the laundry. I can't go do whatever. Right? So you can combine your tapping with something you're already doing. Right? Time that you feel like I'm just sitting here doing nothing. What do I do? Well, I guess I'll get on Facebook and read Facebook, or I can just tap on something real quick. So just find some time and some space for yourself. But for me, like this was really helpful to start doing some of my big relationship stuff when I went to Sweden. Like the big thing, I was like, I wrote a book on touch. So, of course, all my relationship stuff was coming up. Now I'm writing a book on relationships, and that stuff is still coming up. It's amazing. I'm like, didn't I work on all this stuff already? But there's different levels and different layers to everything. So don't be concerned if something that you've worked on a million times shows up a little bit again already. Right? Whether you worked on it in therapy or with a counselor or by yourself or whatever, because wherever our brains are at today, we'll remember a different little piece. And I think I've said this before in this class, but just like, for example, that abusive situation I was in when I was in my 20s, right? The drunk. Every time I work on it, there's less energy. You know what I mean? So like I can think now about him axing down the door. I can think about him throwing the drum through the window. I can think about him screaming at me, da, da, da. But every once in a while something little will come up. I'm like, oh yeah. I remember when he was really angry because he decided to go 100% fat free and I put oil in the bottom of the pan so the stuff didn't stick. And he was angry and he refused to eat. Like there's not a lot of emotional charge around that anymore. But it's interesting because I feel it a little bit right here. And it's interesting that that just came up because I haven't actually thought about that in years, right? So it's like interesting. So there's like these little things that live in our body, like, oh, I guess I didn't work on that aspect of it. Okay, well, that's interesting. Why is that coming up right now? And then just work on that piece because it's linked to something else that you're working on somewhere in your life, right? There's something that's resonating there. So I'm just going to throw that out for you. And just as a reminder, when to work with an EFT practitioner, when you can't get things down to 0. When you're having those secondary gains, and maybe you can't even say like, hey, I'm not getting through this because there's a way that it protects me not to get through this. In fact, most people can't see that link, right? Or can't see the link, the layer underneath. So even though I'm tapping on this one thing, nothing's moving, nothing's moving, nothing's moving. It might not be about that situation. It may be about the tone of the voice, the posture they were using, how it reminded you of somebody else, how you felt, why you feel that way, what you know what I mean? Like another belief system that you have. So sometimes these events that are like, why can't I move through this? This is so irritating. I should be able to clear this. It wasn't that big of a deal, right? Has something underneath. Right. And as I mentioned, as a practitioner, I've got like 10 techniques. I'm actually going to take a really advanced matrix frame printing class coming up where we start learning how to work with the child part of ourselves as well as the adult part of ourselves and kind of integrate those two pieces. Right. So I'm super excited for that. So this is some of the work that I can help facilitate to help you also get faster results. So you're not tapping on something for years and years and years, but we can kind of get to the core. What's that related to? What's that related to? What's that related to? What's that related to? Great. If we work on that, that's going to clear all of these events that go along with it. So instead of tapping on all 7 events, now you're tapping on one event, and then the energy from all those 7 events go away because it's in that little box of storage that I talked about, that your brain has stored all your relationship stuff in, or all your why you should believe that you're fat stuff in, or why you believe you deserve XYZ in a relationship, or what you should put up with, or boundaries, or whatever it is. I can also support you working through trauma, right? Because we use techniques where we're not actually talking about the trauma until so much is cleared that by the time you're talking about the trauma, it's pretty mellow. Right? So we use a lot of techniques to access the brain to work with the trauma without, and you don't even ever have to say it out loud if you don't want to. Okay. Some people come to me once a month to keep focused and accountable. Or if you're supporting others, if you're a caretaker, people will come to me just to get their own emotional support. Right. So recently I worked with a client I've been working with him for a long time, but he started coming to me a little bit more because, his wife's in hospice. And he was having some stress at work, and she wanted to know about his stress at work, but he didn't want to share with her because she's dying. So he wanted to tell her just enough, but not so much that she'd get worked up too, So he was trying to balance, but he needed to get it out because it was making him sick, feeling like, I'm holding stuff back from my wife, so now I feel guilty. But also at the same time, I'm grieving my wife as I'm watching her slowly die, right? So we were able to work together to help support him in that way, so he could really be present and peaceful when he was with his wife as she went through her last phases. Yeah. Another thing I wanted to also bring up, because a lot of women are mothers, and even if you haven't actually had a birth, maybe you've adopted, maybe you've kind of semi-adopted, you've taken someone on in the mothering role in your volunteer organization or whatever. But also we all have mothers or didn't, right? But someone gave birth to us. So you can also look at events around mothering or events around being mothered, because this also informs who we are as a woman. We were going to do a demo. I called Darcy and she was very gracious. And I said, I actually have crammed so much new stuff in here. I don't think we have time to demo. So that's that. Next steps. Once again, you've got a 30-minute complimentary health and healing strategy session with me. If you're struggling, please, please, please use that. You can call me, you can email me, you can book it straight from my website. You can also, if you're ready to take that next step, buy a package of 3. For right now, that's $375. After I do my advanced training in May, my packages and everything are going to look much, much different, because I'm noticing that people are getting success in 3 sessions, but also that there's a level of depth that they're not able to access. So I'm going to start packaging them into bigger packages, into kind of bigger programs per se, so they can achieve deeper levels of healing for themselves. So just know, if you know that you only want 3 sessions or only want a couple sessions now, before May 1st is the time to do that. And then I've got 2 upcoming classes, Cutting Cravings and Compulsions, which is going to be completely different than this class. And then we're going to do one around intimacy and relationships, which is going to be around emotional and physical intimacy specifically. So, where does your emotional intimacy impact your physical intimacy? Where do the two come together? And so that's another 4-week. Both of those are 4-week classes. Are there any questions, concerns, clarifications? That was a lot of information to jam in an hour.
What date is that April 20th one? Is that Tuesdays?
That's third. No, it says a Tuesday. Yes, because my cravings classes are on Thursdays, and the other ones will be Tuesdays.
Okay.
That
And
is-
to sign up for your cravings classes, is it on your website?
It is on the. It should be on the website. Otherwise, you can go to Eventbrite, the same place that you signed up for this. So it should be under events on my website, and then it'll click you over to Eventbrite.
Okay.
And then your website is Touch Remedies.
Remedies.com. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, because I want to share that one too.
Cool.
And then that one slide that you had, identify your events,
Yes.
write down up to 3
Mhm.
events or situations.
Yes.
I missed the other part of it, situations with our mothers or.
Yeah, with your mothers or with around mothering in general. So if you were a mother, I'm going to paste my Eventbrite link in the chat as well, if that's easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, around being mothered, around being a mother, around not having a mother, you know, around having 2 mothers, maybe you had a mother and a stepmother or a series of mothers. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot that comes up mothering, and especially our identity as women and how we believe we should act in the world is often informed by that relationship.
Okay.
So what was the last thing on that slide? Because I got the emotions thinking of each one. Where do you feel it? And was there one thing under that?
It was probably the level of intensity. Yes.
Oh,
So play with that as well in your personal peace procedure in the next few days.
All right.
Any other questions?
well, that personal piece sounded like a lot. And so to do the
A lot of people go.
one-on-one, that 30-minute thing, that's through the same thing? The same link that you posted?
Nope, I will post a different link for that. That's just my Eventbrite, so that brings you to my Eventbrite page. And I'll email all this out as well, but I know it's easier just to kind of do it now. Come on, my links are all right here. Where is it? Do.
You will send us an email with all this info so we can share it.
Yep.
Good.
Oh, there it is. It's right in front of my face. Kept seeing the EFT promo 20-minute session, but there's the health and healing strategy session. That's the 30-minute. But yeah, you can also find that from my website. If you go to touchremedies.com, go to services, and it's under the list of services there as well. And there's just a book now button. But as always, people have different hours. So if you have a challenge getting in, if none of those hours fit you, just reach out to me, because I can be pretty wiggly with hours. Because like right now I'm working with a woman from the island of Cyprus. They're a 9-hour difference, right? So it's like, if we don't get the exact time around her work and her kids and her school, right? So often like I'm wiggling my schedule around or whatever, which is fine with me. I just don't want to leave a 12-hour gap open in my day and then have like one at 8 a.m., then one at noon, and then one at 8 p.m. And then like, what happened to my day?
Right.
Yeah, thank you so much for this lovely course. It was so much nice to meet you and everybody else in the class and my sister, and just like I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot.
I'm
Yeah.
glad. And well done on doing the work, all of you.
Mhm.
No matter how you choose to use it moving forward in your life, even if it's just to go to sleep every once in a while,
Mhm.
A lot more to learn.
Always, right?
Yeah.
Always. Yeah, I took a 2-day weekend course. I'm taking a series of courses on it, and I'm trying to jam it in a little bit for you guys to use in 4 hours. It's not
I have to get going. Bye, guys.
lovely. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you. The information was amazing. It
Yeah.
really was. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, Chris. Bye, Sandra.
Yeah. Take care and thanks again.